And we're live.
We're live. Amazing. Hello, everyone. Welcome to another live show of Build to Thrive with Alex Randall, who is the person running ARK Strategy. And Alex and I connect in similar missions. I think, Alex, I don't want to talk for you, but why don't you go ahead and let everybody know about your newsletter and what you've been doing.
Yeah. Hey, everybody. Good morning. Thanks, Juan, for having me on Build to Thrive. I'm really excited to be here today. I'm Alex Randall Kittredge, and I write the ARK Strategy newsletter here on Substack, helping knowledge workers and office workers build a durable career that transcends the corporate ladder in the post-AI economy. So, I think everyone's been, unless you've been living under a rock since 2022, the world of work has changed quite a bit. And we're still starting to see what comes of that. We're still in this interregnum middle period where folks are unsure what will we be going back to what came before, or will we continue in a new direction? And I think that's what my Substack tries to help folks answer.
Excellent. And we have the co-host here, Katie Barnes.
Hello, everyone.
You have the heart right on top of your head. So, okay. So Katie has this look like Minnie.
My daughter will love to hear that because that's like her idol. So perfect.
Yeah. So, just to mention, Build to Thrive, and then they'll introduce you to talk about your newsletter. So, interestingly enough, came from hospitality background and real estate and finance and education in the last 25 years. And about 10 months ago, I started the idea of developing a newsletter. And I'm not going to bore you, but this is like my fifth iteration in the newsletter. And the more I connect with clients, the more I sense the anxiety, especially the professional clients, in really going from a corporate job to going fractional, or looking into ways in which they're not so they're insulated on the potential impact of AI plus other things. So Kate and I have been doing this series called "The Case for Going Fractional," and this program is part of this whole series. So Kate, you want to talk about your newsletter and what you do?
Sure. Yeah. My newsletter is called Systems and Side Eyes, and it's kind of like that, dry, humorous look at inside the startup world mostly, because if we don't laugh at it, then you're just going to cry a lot. So try to laugh at it. And then, Juan and I have been working on this project lately. I went fractional about a year ago and have really enjoyed the journey and like sharing it with others. So kind of venturing into that in my Substack newsletter as well.
So Katie and I delivered our first workshop together, webinar. And I'm not going to say it was a success. It was a crazy. So here's the thing. We promoted this workshop called Unbundling the Value of Your Experience. We prepare very hard. And for the last 3 weeks, we've been promoting this. And we got 53 registrations.
Wow.
So me, the tech guy who knows a lot about tech, of course not. I use this comment from what's the name from Perplexity to go into Kit to do all the automations and all the sequencing. So now we're very lazy these days. We don't learn about these things. We just tell the agent, just go ahead and do it. Well, what happened was two things that happened. One is that he created a Zoom link with a passcode. So mess up number one. And number two, it's sent an email saying that we already delivered the workshop.
Workshop. Yeah, one agent is getting fired.
Oh my God. So there was I like juggling and asking my agent, you messed up, you better correct this. So
wait, is that what you're doing? I didn't realize that.
Oh my God. So to make a long story short, we're going to go and do another webinar next Wednesday for everyone. I'm going to send out the link again and all that. I hope in the audience there's no one affected. If so, I assume complete responsibility for that. Oh boy! So let's start the discussion. So, Alex, you have the concept of portfolio careers
Hmm.
as as a new way to insulate yourself from what's happening in corporations. And I know I've seen your some of your live shows, some of your programs, and you connect this with a bunch of drivers or incentives that exist now. What I love for you to do is just give us an overview of your thesis. What's happening, kind of what are the trends, what are the numbers. It'll be great to understand, kind of like from the general experience of what you're seeing to more into specific things about fractional work, which is the idea of continue our conversation that Katie and I started.
Yeah, thanks, Juan. It's great to be here this morning or this afternoon. And I think, you know, why now? What's the forcing function? What's bringing folks to this point in time? And, to your point earlier, you gave a great example. AI isn't just automating tasks. It's eliminating the justification for keeping folks as full time employees in roles that can be handled by a tool or a functional expert. So, not too long ago, if you were trying to send out stuff for your live stream, maybe you'd have an administrative assistant or an executive assistant. Now that's an agent. An agent can do a lot of those things apart from call someone up on the phone. Although I have heard that some agents nowadays can use the phone, which I don't know how I feel about. And basically, I always like to talk about my grandfather who, worked at one company for 30 years. He retired with a gold watch and a pension. And, especially if you were to tell someone who's Gen Z nowadays that that was even possible, I think they would look at you like you were crazy or you had two heads because the social contract of employment, the one where, loyalty was traded for security, that's been broken. And AI is just accelerating the exposure of that fracture. I think too, the professionals most at risk from this AI transition aren't necessarily the most low skilled workers or least skilled workers. It's often the very highly skilled knowledge workers who are going to be disrupted by the artificial intelligence. I think, most at risk potentially are mid-career corporate employees who have been optimizing for one company's internal logic for 10 years or more. I speak to folks all the time. I spoke to one person or two folks actually who worked at Google for 10 years and then they were laid off. And, when that happens, your whole identity is wrapped up inside a single corporation. It's very disorienting. You sort of find yourself at a crossroads and you don't necessarily know which way to go. And I think, you know, what you're seeing nowadays more and more, especially here on Substack, is people coming to the platform after a layoff, realizing that they have no external market signal for what their value is. It's very easy to be a star performer inside an organization, but the moment you're laid off, everything that you've built inside that corporation or inside that internal marketplace disappears. And if you're not building in public, you're severely at a disadvantage.
So I like that you bring that up because that's actually the core of our webinar next Wednesday.
Mm.
We're actually unbundle that value that you have. I like that you touch on the identity because one of the things that we're seeing is because AI going so quickly in disrupting the traditional jobs. What we're seeing is something called identity lag.
Mm.
The technology is going so fast that the story that you tell yourself who you are is catching up to that and really trying to gauge what's really happening. So our webinar actually talks about that, understanding those different drivers, and then Katie does a wonderful exercise about how do you change that mindset. Katie, I don't know if you want to jump in, talk about that, but I think Alex hit the right chord for what we're discussing and talking about that.
Yeah, I agree. And I said a little bit of this in our workshop yesterday, but when I went out fractional initially, I had all these ideas of, okay, I have to have this amazing website and I need a LinkedIn presence. I need to be loud there. But what I kind of skipped was understanding exactly how to explain what problem I'm solving. I mean, I knew like you said, I knew what I could do within, and now didn't come corporate. I've always been startup, but I knew what I could do in that seat there as the COO or the head of ops or whatever it was. But I didn't know how to best explain something that people would, pick off the shelf and buy
Mm.
instead of just as an employee. So that's what we're really working through.
Excellent. Hey, and I'd like to ask the audience if they could just drop a line just saying if they're professionals or they're founders, operator, just try to gauge what the audience is. I I kind of did this in the webinar. It's interesting that it was almost half half. Some people are interested in unbundling the value of their experience, whether you're a founder or whether you're a professional. It turns out that we all need that change of mindset and really understand and focus. So feel free to drop a line. If you're shy, don't drop a line.
Well, we
The
won't
other-
call you out. We can pull you in anyway. We can't call you out too hard. So if you're here in the chat, that's all. We're not going to make you speak. But
yeah,
And I
and
think
Katie,
too,
you
I
and I
don't.
have an experience. We had 270 people in one of our lives, and nobody
yeah,
said anything. Said, "Come on,
come on, people, you
we're
got
not
this.
that bad, guys."
Not scary.
No, I don't want to ask you to give up the secret sauce that's going to come in the form of your workshop. But I guess, Katie, my question would be, going fractional. There's often that on ramp, that ramp up time to figure out how you define and sell what your services are. I wonder, how do you recommend folks validate the market demand for their expertise before going and systematizing it or building that website? I guess it's sort of a chicken and an egg question.
It is, and it took a lot of learning, and I think it's different for a lot of people. We've discussed in these lives that for me, I'm very comfortable being loud and proud on LinkedIn and Substack, so I could test my messaging and things that way. But I know that's not for everyone. So in our workshop, we're definitely going to address that at the end and come up with ways for you to pressure test this a little bit. But I think there's no better way than just kind of doing it. But to
Mm.
get there to have the statement or the product or the package to even test, I think you really have to look inward. And I spend a lot of time doing different branding work and different activities and exercises like what Juan and I are offering to pull out the exact problem and the numbers related to the problem that you're fixing so that you can really tell that story better than just saying, I was an operator for early stage teams. Just there's better language that you need to put there before you even start pressure testing.
Yeah, I think that's great too, because I think the test often is like, can you explain your value to a stranger in 60 seconds without referencing your former employer or like a well-known brand? That's, I think, where folks sometimes fall down.
I think you're probably right there. And the other thing that I always come back to on that one is my resume does not have those big logos on it. So that was something that I had a lot of imposter syndrome about in the beginning. But once I learned how to vocalize what I was really doing, it didn't matter so much.
That's a great point. Yeah, I think that makes a lot of sense.
Hey, Alex, if you don't mind, and just type in the the website of each other's newsletter. Um, I know Katie's, I know, but which one is yours? Is it ARK Strategy?
Yeah, that's my Substack. It's just alexrandallkittredge.substack.com/subscribe. I'll put it in the chat.
Why don't you, yeah, just write it down for everyone. Okay, so one thing that I wanted to ask you about, it's the concept of what do you call the portfolio career.
Mm.
What does that mean, and why is it important?
Yeah, well, I think there's a number of things, but the way I define portfolio career is having a set of skills and abilities and income streams that um, align with your income, your identity, and the impact that you bring. So, it's not necessarily that you have one W-2 job or you have one, I don't know, book deal or something like that. It's a portfolio of assets. So you have different parts of that. And I think whether it's fractional work or you could even be a W-2 role, a full-time role, that can be part of your portfolio. I think, I've written a book in the process of publishing it called How Your Side Hustles Will Save You, creating a durable career that transcends the corporate ladder. And, even if you are a full-time employed employee, there's so much precarity in the employment contract these days that my thesis is that your side hustles will one day save you, and I think it comes to everyone who's here on Substack, everyone who's writing, everyone who has a newsletter business, everyone who does something on the side, whether that's speaking, writing, coaching, or volunteering. In fact, actually, unpaid work, volunteering is some of the best skills and proof points that you can put into a portfolio career. I've gotten a lot of great experience and bullet points for my resume from unpaid work that I've done pro bono for charities or volunteer organizations in my area. And I think, when you start to abstract and take that view of what a job is outside of the realm of just strictly 9 to 5 paid work, especially for folks that are employed in an office during the day, you can go home and the hours from 5 to 9 in the, in the morning, that's when you can actually do some of your best work. And I think for so long, we've been conditioned that you need the validation of an employer to be able to have experience. But I think to Katie's point earlier and to what I'm trying to say, there's so much more in your life that is leverageable as valid experience. I think too, I get into this a little bit in the book, but folks nowadays, if you are born in 2026, I think you're probably going to live to be 100 years old. So if you're 100 years old, what's the chances that one job that you have is going to last for, say, 40 years? Like in my grandfather's case, he was very lucky. It was a different world. You could work for one company for so long. But I think nowadays, I encourage folks to think of their career in 5-year sprints. And if you break it up into 5-year sprints, it's both a marathon and a sprint. So you're adding building blocks to the overall arc. But maybe if you're working now in your early years to gain experience, to build skills with a full-time role, maybe you found your consultancy while you're still working. And then, in a later stage of your career, you go into consulting. Or when you retire from a regular job, you build up and you take that consulting work that you've done and turn it into another income stream. I think, when you think of the fact that we're all going to live to be so old, the model as it was built currently, it just doesn't work for us.
You want to pull us back there a little bit as a mom, and I think we have a lot of other probably parents in the room here. And I know what my answer is, and I've done it and pushed through it. But you mentioned the like 5 to 9 a.m. A lot of us don't have that time for just like projects like this. I'm spending it with my kiddo or work, maybe even doing client work or something after that. But how would you suggest, if you have that type of responsibility and lifestyle, how would you suggest still finding a way to get that energy out or find your side hustle?
Yeah, well, I think everyone is different. Again, I think it depends on where you are and what your caretaking responsibilities are. But for instance, I was a volunteer crisis counselor with the Trevor Project. I did that in my spare time, and I found that very rewarding. It was something that I wasn't paid for, but definitely was, giving back to the community. I think, we only have 24 hours in the day, and that whether you're Jeff Bezos or you're someone down the street, it's a human limitation that we only have so much time in the day, and oftentimes time is your most scarcest or your scarcest resource. So definitely being intentional about how you spend your time. I think, to your point, I've heard of a lot of parents. I'm not a parent yet, but I've heard of a lot of parents, taking that 5 to maybe 8 p.m. period where their kids are awake and really going all in, spending time with the kids, doing dinner, an activity, turning off the phone, turning off the computer. And then once the kids go to bed, maybe if you're not exhausted, which is a tall order, maybe you can pick up with some of the stuff that we're talking about. I don't know. Have you found that to work for you?
Yeah, I have. And I think a lot of the reason that I went fractional in the first place was to get that freedom so that I can go pick her up from daycare when I need to in the middle of the day a lot of times. And so I have that freedom to kind of fill that in where it works for me. And I know not everyone has that, so I'm grateful for that. But even with working that full day on client work and then trying to come back and write my newsletter or spend more time on LinkedIn or whatnot, I do use that time, like you're saying, when I have the energy, which is sometimes rare with a 3-year-old. It's kind of like you live just in her world. But I think, yeah, you just kind of have to make it work. But it's something that Juan and I have talked about in these talks a lot already, is that I went fractional because I wanted to have more control of my calendar. I don't know if I wanted to work less exactly, but I think I thought that initially. And I would say that's very untrue at this point. Like, I'm putting way more hours in than I was probably for my employer at this point, but it's work that I really enjoy. So that is how I've been able to like cope with it and make it work for me.
Yeah. I was going to comment, Alex, on one thing that you said that got my my attention. You talk about learning different skills and experiences, and it kind of remind me. But you, by the way, you probably describe a potential curriculum to a new university, right?
Maybe.
I,
Yeah, maybe that's what I should go into.
I guess these days I find myself promoting that to a lot of people. For instance, Sam Illingworth. A lot of people know Sam. He has a newsletter, Slow AI. I'm encouraging him to develop the slow university I tell you about this. By the way, I did ask for the position of provost just in case. But in on what you said, it kind of reminds me of the what Germany and Japan did after World War II. That they created those schools that at a technical level where people would work, let's say, a semester, and then will study a semester and kind of back and forth. And in 3 years, you were out. Kind of what happened vocational schools here, and there are a few programs like that. But it sounds like that's kind of like what you're promoting.
Well, I think that's certainly one way to go about it, but I also think that, what AI does with this whole process, it really changes the calculus. So when you have AI or when you have an agent or some tools, it really lowers the floor to execution. And so anyone can produce content, anyone can code. I mean, I'm not a coder, but I have had AI write some code for me once or twice, perhaps. Anyone can do the analysis with the computer at scale. And you know this means that I think the problem is that generic expertise has been commodified. So, and I often talk about this, I always bring this up in a live stream, that when the technical skills or when the analysis can be done by the computer, the most important aspect is your human element, your human aspect. And I think I say this now, and I'm going to keep saying it until it's no longer true with Elon Musk's humanoid robots. But the robot can't yet go into a room and pitch a slide deck. It can't convince an executive. It can't argue a point. It can't appeal to your emotions yet. Once that happens, I think then we're behind the 8 ball. But until then, there's still this advantage that you have for being a human.
I mean, I think we learned yesterday, Juan, that we can't trust the agent.
You
Got to
know,
keep that human piece.
I do have a serious conversation with my agent. Yeah.
He's in trouble.
Yeah. Interesting what you said. One of the things that we're seeing, and particularly at the beginning of February, I think there are a lot of things that happen in AI that made us pause for a little bit. One of the things is that Claude Cowork
Mm,
and the different plugins that AI model has in basically replicating the different departments within
mm.
a company. And I don't know if you're aware, but if you look at the legal plugin, it kind of substitute a paralegal. Like a lot
Oh,
of the work that a paralegal does in terms of reviewing documents and drafting documents and really doing the research and all that, it does that part. and then it actually highlights different colors. What you should, what it's okay based on your business perspective. What you should probably review yourself, but review, and it tells you different things that you should consider, and then what you definitely need to go to your attorney and review it. And then if you go to finance, then it does bookkeeping, it does financial forecast. It can compare a bunch of things. I mean, what it does in Excel is just unbelievable. So when you see a tool like this, where it's not only the knowledge but also the execution and also coordination within the other departments, then you start thinking about the number of meetings that we normally have to coordinate within a company to get the job done. So from a point of view of the efficiency, and thinking about our series, Katie, and how fractional workers are going to become more and more important, more key about this thing, is that what is left out of that structure is judgment. It's people who could exercise judgment about different situations that present itself in the company, and being able to use these tools, but really having the level like you have in terms of what operations should look like. It should be there. So that's one of the things that is happening in February, along with a few websites. One's called Rent a Human. I don't know if you guys have seen that. You basically, it's like TaskRabbit, but for AI, right? So AI actually hires humans. And the first day that came out, about 8,000 people subscribed. So so now we have job posts of humans doing that. And also there's another one called Coworkers, where basically an agent rents capacity from an agent and they transact.
Huh.
So,
I've not heard of that one.
Yeah, I
Well,
don't either.
Well, I think one thing that you raised, and I previously was, I've worked in a number of corporate environments, but my most recent corporate role was chief of staff to the CHRO, Chief Human Resource Officer at a public company. And in May of 2024, I was out in California at the SHRM, the Society for Human Resource Management, AI plus HI, Human Intelligence Conference. And this was about 2 years ago. It was May of 2024. And the advice from SHRM, which is the national sort of human resources credentialing body, was that human resources nowadays has to prepare workers and prepare employees for this drastic change that's happening. They have to prepare in reskilling, re-architecting folks' identity, because to your point, Juan, finance is one of the most one of the primest examples of an area of a business that's ripe for AI disruption. I think when you have a tool that can do all of the tactical finance work, whether that's, ledger entries or bookkeeping, the task becomes much more strategic. It becomes that the element of judgment based on experience. And, I think we all have experiences like your agent, where we've delegated the judgment to the agent and it's gone horribly wrong. To Katie's point, we have to keep the human in the loop, at least still nowadays, for that element that AI still just doesn't quite have.
yeah,
Yeah,
I
I mean,
had
I
a
see it
very
constantly on the operations side of people. And again, I'm early stage companies typically, but when I come in, there's no good, clear system set up or anything. And then they still want to put automations on top of it. And you're just like, well, you can't, guys, because if you don't have something very clear set up, I get what you're saying. And I love Claude Cowork and all of that as well. But if you come in with no system set up, it doesn't matter. Your finances are going to be all jacked up because it's
right.
not getting the right inputs anyway.
Mm.
So, Katie, where were you when I was developing my company, my real estate portfolio company, and my hospitality? I was the other day. I said, well, if only I would have used a fractional worker, because at that time, and we're going to talk about, what goes in the way of and why a founder really hires a fractional worker, and it's in that level where you don't know if you're going to be hiring a CPA to do your books, or CFO, or it's probably $100,000 or $200,000 decision, and how can fractional workers really cover that? I think if we kind of do an overview of that, Katie, maybe you can talk about that. I know there in the audience there's founders that might be thinking about that, or they're professionals who are thinking in transitioning to fractional. So why don't we just give a little bit of overview about that?
Yeah, I can give a little overview, but would love to hear what you think too, Alex, because these people, if you've joined for any of our other lives, you've probably already kind of heard me go on this spiel. But I think the real beauty of fractional, and I can speak on this, I think, because one, I am a fractional, but also because I've hired fractionals as the head of ops or COO. So I've seen the real benefit of it for early stage companies. Again, that's where my background is. But where you, like you said, that hire typically would be a $200,000 plus hire to bring that in on full time. But when you hire fractionally, you can bring that in, get that person's background and experience for a much lower hit on your runway. You might get fewer hours with them, and you will get fewer hours with them. But the beauty of their experience is that they've already gone through all of this before, and they've seen patterns. They've seen how to really make an impact quick. So when I come in and work with a company, I get to work. Like, we're not sitting here doing like your standard onboarding or anything. Like, I get in there, get in the weeds, figure it out, and start problem solving immediately. So I think that's a huge benefit, is you get all that experience for a price that's not going to totally tank the runway. And then it also, it gives you a little bit more flexibility because you can kind of test if the relationship's right, or, you're not risking bringing a hire in that's just not the right fit.
Well, I think you raise a good point, Katie, and I've experienced this too. I've done fractional work for various startups and seed or pre-seed stage companies, and you're right. They really did need that level of targeted expertise for maybe 4 hours a week or a certain amount of time. But at the end of the engagements that I've had with these companies, which run about 4 to 6 months, depending on the amount of work that needs to be done, I've had some of them offer me jobs, and I've had to tell them there really isn't much enough of a job here for me yet. You're not big enough to use the breadth of the skills and experience that I can bring to the table. And I think, when you get a little bit bigger, or maybe in your next fundraising round or next series, we can have that conversation. But right now, and I was having a conversation with John Bruton the other day, a CFO, if you're doing a fractional CFO work, I'm not a CFO, but, the amount of work that needs to be done in a small company, really it takes up a piece of your time, but the rest of the time in the week or the month, you would be incredibly bored because there's not enough work for you to do.
Yeah, I think that's true. But a lot of the clients and I work on similar basis, like 3 to 6 month engagements. Typically, sometimes it does go longer. But I think the way that I usually like to sell my clients, because they're the ones that are trying to go to that scale phase, is that hopefully we do get you set up with the systems that you are scaling. And maybe you do need that person that's in, maybe not
Mm.
full time, but more. And in that case, I like to say that I will come in and help you set up those systems and your personal handbook for your team, your company, and hand that off to the person that will be full time. But so I
It's a
think it
great
goes both
selling point.
ways.
Yeah.
It goes both ways. Sometimes they do end up needing that at the end. Sometimes they don't. I think a fractional CFO, that one's a harder one in my head to say that you need that full time. But
Absolutely. So, Alex, the going back to your concept about portfolio careers, um, and the transition, where do you see the the difference between a fractional work and a consultant work and a freelance work? If you could kind of talk about those differences and how you prepare. From my understanding is you advise I think what it says is Gen Zs and millennials about their careers. Um so it would be interesting to kind of for the audience who are in that bracket. I am certainly not in that bracket, but how do you prepare for that, and whether that's a transition into going fractional, what happens before or after, because some people are a little confused about those different concepts.
Yeah, well, I think fractional and a portfolio career are similar, but to your point, fractional is still trading time for money or income. Freelance is similar in that it's trading time for money or income, but I think the difference with fractional is that you're selling outcomes. So it's much more outcome based as opposed to freelance where it's transactional, time bound. Maybe you're doing tasks. There's a difference between doing tasks and doing outcomes. It almost comes down, Katie. I don't know if you're familiar. You're obviously familiar with OKRs, but it's like the objectives and the key results. A freelancer, maybe you're doing key results. A fractional, you're doing objectives. You're achieving the objectives. And I think too, portfolio careers. It's a holistic term for the sum total of all of your different income streams. So certainly fractional work can be in a portfolio career. You could do freelance work in a portfolio career, but I think, they're almost, they're very similar in that sense. And I think that's the beauty of the portfolio career, because depending on the stage of your life, you could transition back into a traditional full-time role somewhere and continue your piece of work on the side, or you could make up your entire income with a number of fractional engagements, which I think a lot of folks do nowadays. And both of those things are portfolio careers. They're just different ways of putting the portfolio together. And I think, as Katie said, fractional is often the on-ramp into an organization. If you grow the organization while you're there and you're successful and they need more of your expertise, that's how you can validate the demand inside a company for the skills that you're offering. I think, if you treat your career like an investor treats a portfolio, then, that diversification becomes key. You don't want levels of high, like asymmetric risk in your career or in your portfolio, and you want to be able to manage the downside if one thing were to disappear tomorrow.
How do you keep a balance on that? Because sometimes you have maybe 60% of your time occupying fractional, and at times you are at the peak. How do you balance that volume? Seems like there's a challenge there in terms of um, occupying that and charging the right amount of money so that it's actually worth for you. So you could have the benefit of being employed full time. Unless you don't want that, you could probably continue your fractional route. But sometimes it's just the clients are not there, and you gotta deal with that. Or sometimes a client just needs, let's say, 20 hours of your time, and then there's another client that needs you know 30 hours of your time, and you're trying to like fit it all together. So I wonder how you can organize work around that agenda.
Well, maybe I'm old fashioned, but I think you can approach it with an economic lens. And if you simply look at the, maybe sum total of the amount of money you need or want to earn and back it out from there, I think, the key constraint that everyone has in our day is the number of hours. That's universal. And, I think I was talking with another fractional operator, but if you find yourself in a position where there's more demand for your skills than time that you have to do it, that's a clear indicator that you need to raise your prices.
Right. Exactly. Is that what you do, Katie? You're getting expensive these days.
Yeah. It's a crazy balance, and I think I'm uniquely suited for it as an ops person. I think we're like operations people are usually the ones that are organizing things anyway, so I feel pretty good about it, but I'm learning as we go for sure. Even as we work through this project and figuring out how to best separate my time has been a challenge for sure.
Okay. Alex, what about visibility in terms of jumping in and starting this portfolio career and making a name for yourself? And yeah,
Yeah, well, I think, the biggest thing and the biggest hurdle and barrier that folks face is often not skill or strategy. Folks have a lot of experience inside of their previous roles. It's the identity problem. And, when you identify so wholeheartedly with a job or an employer, you almost, I gave that example of the Google employee earlier, but you don't necessarily know who you are without it. And so the first step is, building out your portfolio or your book of artifacts, experience, evidence, offerings, so that if the job were to come, and I've had this experience recently, if a job offer comes, it often it feels like an option for you, or it feels like something that you could do. It doesn't necessarily feel like your salvation, or you're in a desperate position you need to accept immediately because you and your family are going to lose the mortgage or something. It gives you that optionality, and I think when you have that optionality and you have that durable identity that transcends the corporate identity, it puts you in a much more resilient place from both a income perspective, but also an identity perspective.
That's interesting because the webinar that Katie and I are doing next week, it kind of points at that, in that you need to really understand what you're bringing to the table, and understanding that, and that has to do with in part kind of like when the way companies or entrepreneur will think of the next opportunity. Um, so basically, you're looking at someone who creates value, delivers value, and captures value, which is basically what a company does. So a case could be made that we should all think about as entrepreneurs, regardless if you're professional or a founder. You always have that way of thinking, that you're basically uh, focusing on the client, and what was the pain point, what is the uncertainty that you reduce or eliminate for someone, and what is the promise that you stand behind, which is kind of universal to a lot of the skills um, that you have. So that departs you from looking at just a role, and more about what you bring to the table. So that, which is kind of what it's in alignment with what you said.
Well, I think too, and I know we're coming up at about time for the live stream, but I think, I always go back to this. My previous life, I was an academic, and I studied history, intellectual history, and philosophy. And I wrote a book in graduate school on Foucault's understanding of enlightenment, and his lectures at the Collège de France in Paris. And, back in the 70s, it's very interesting. Foucault was talking about folks in liberalism, neoliberalism, are forced now to, or then, to become an entrepreneur of the self. You can't be tied to a single employer identity. You have to have your own entrepreneurial identity. And I think, it's 50 years later, but I think we're all living inside that world now. And it doesn't sound crazy or fanciful. It sounds like the truth. And, I don't know if that resonates with you, but when I heard you talking about that, it reminds me of the entrepreneur of the self. You're your own entrepreneur.
Right. And when you talked to John about this, I remember he said that companies are becoming tech stacks, and we're all companies. So it just kind of like connects the
Yeah,
same
no,
idea.
and I do think that, I've read a lot and I've listened to a lot of folks these days that are talking about, with agents nowadays. If you found a company and build an agentized product, that can be maybe a $5 million business, and you're the only owner, you're the sole owner. The barriers to entry, and Katie, you can probably speak to this as well. Maybe you talk about this in the workshop. How do you set up a company? Do you form an LLC, or do you go S-Corp? I know I had that recently where I was trying to figure that out, and I was setting up a payroll provider and doing tax documents. It's very technical, but I think that, unfortunately or fortunately, is the way folks are moving in the future. And if you can provide a roadmap for folks, that could be very helpful.
Yeah, working on that one right now, actually.
We're all doing it.
Yeah, lettuce seems to be a nice route for ease of use to go S-Corp, but yeah.
Well, it's funny. I saw lettuce and I saw what they were charging, and I asked Claude, I said, Claude, can I do this myself? And it gave me the steps, and I actually just
You did it?
bootstrapped it. I did it myself.
Right. I think I need to do that too. That's what I'm like, I don't really want to.
$300 a month is kind of, I'm sure it's a great product, but that's kind of pricey.
Yeah.
I know,
Yeah.
I know, and that's a cheaper value. Sometimes it's even more.
Yeah.
Crazy.
But that's the point with AI. You can go out on your own, even with these products, software as a service, that are being cannibalized, I guess.
But be
I don't
careful.
know.
Make sure your agent knows what the hell he's doing.
Yeah, don't have the agent fill out the tax forms for you.
Yeah.
That could be a problem.
I have had mixed experience, so you gotta just keep a tight leash on your agent.
Still got to check it.
Just be careful. Oh boy. So great. what else we need to cover here based on your thesis? What do you think you like to talk about, Alex? Just to
Well,
wrap it up.
I think, the call to action or the closing is really that, the window to build before you're forced, if you're an employee, is starting to narrow. And, the people that will thrive and survive this transition that we're all going through are the ones who started building outside of their job before they needed to. And I write about that at ARK Strategy. I help folks build a durable career that transcends the corporate ladder. I know in the chat we've had some folks talk about, their identity being tied up in an employer and working to unbundle that. For folks that are on that journey or trying to figure out how that works, or to learn from someone else's experience, that's what I write about at ARK Strategy. How do you structure your career portfolio? How do you sequence the moves, even down to the technical aspects? I'm going to write a piece next week on the LLC S-Corp transition. I think that's going to be a fun
I'll
one.
be reading that one.
But I would love to ask you, Juan and Katie, how do you see founders and the folks that you coach successfully make this transition? I think it's really hard to do, and there's necessarily no roadmap. We're all living through it in real time, even all three of us on this call. And I think, we all share this common denominator, to be building in public and to be doing it here on Substack. I think, if you haven't checked out my Substack, please do ARK Strategy. And it's been great to collaborate with you. We'll have to do this again sometime as we continue on in this process.
Yes, for
Absolutely.
sure.
About the entrepreneurs, I can tell you that what part of the nature of an entrepreneur is being very positive, very optimistic, because you're going to fail a lot,
Mm,
and you learn that failure is not the word, but learning is the word. Um, as an entrepreneur, any entrepreneur, we tend to start what I call the uninformed optimism.
mm,
So we start with very little knowledge about what it takes to develop a company. And even though you go to workshops and all that, um, entrepreneurship is really learned in the trenches. It's not until you do that and you have a series of hiccups that then you say, okay, it's a marathon when I'm running, and it gets to a point where sometimes you crash, and then the key thing is to keep on going, to have the resilience at the time to say, you know, this might have not worked, but there's an adjacent side of it that might click, and you start getting signal, and
mm,
that's when you go to become an optimist that is informed, that is actually can develop a company, and you're successful. But the pathway is that curve to take there. A lot of people end up in the bottom,
mm,
and then they just stop doing it. And most of the entrepreneurs who have become successful are obsessed people, and that obsession is what drives you to go up the hill again,
mm,
even though you tweak, you have to tweak whatever you need to tweak until it clicks, and being consistent at it. Um, which are, newsletters are great because newsletter give you signal immediately about what's working, what's not working, about your content. So it's very helpful. Katie, you want to comment on that?
I think you have to really want it. It's a lot of work. You have to really want it. So it's that obsession, I guess. But I also think the beauty of what we're offering in these workshops and then the paid lab too is that what you'll walk away with doesn't necessarily mean you need to quit your job and become fractional or become portfolio or whatever. It just means that you're going to walk away understanding what your actual value is and be able to speak that to whoever you need to. So if you want to stay full time, but you want to get a raise or you want a promotion or something, this is going to help you get that too, which is something that I learned fairly quickly in my fractional learnings, is that once I could really speak around those things, I knew I was going to be set. Even if I got to that bottom part and decided this is not for me, I was going to be able to better speak about what value I brought someone.
So,
Well,
Katie,
that's that's a great point, I think, to end on. Everyone should join Juan and Katie's webinar. They should join the seminar to learn about, how to unbundle your experience, your value, and whether you stay locked into a role or not. you can do both. It's not a binary, but you can do both. And I know I'll be checking out. Maybe I can get a discount code on that webinar.
Actually, it's a
We'll
free.
talk about
it's a
that
free
offline.
webinar.
Free, yeah.
It's a free webinar. So
Oh, it's free. Even
yeah.
better. Then why not join? There's no reason not to.
Exactly. So I left the link to register in the chat. And it's called Unbundling the Value of Your Experience. So we're doing this next Wednesday at 11:30 a.m. Eastern time.
Correct.
I get that right?
Correct.
just to wrap it up, tell us your newsletter, how to go to the newsletter. Same Katie, and I'll do my part.
Yeah, sure. So Systems and Side Eyes, I'll link it again in our chat here. I usually link people to my, I don't even know which page this is, but the part that has notes too, because I feel like I'm very vocal there and it really gets across if you want to subscribe to me or not. You'll know quick from my notes. So
Excellent.
And I'm Alex Randall Kittredge. I write the ARK Strategy newsletter here on Substack, helping knowledge workers and office workers build a durable career that transcends the corporate ladder in the post-AI economy.
Excellent.
Nice.
Juan Salas Romer, Build to Thrive is my newsletter. I help founders and professionals gain clarity, leverage, and income in the AI economy. I'm going to leave my my website here, buildtothrive.co, and Katie's Rise and Optimize and ARK Strategy. Thank you, Alex, for joining us. Thank you, everybody.
Have a great day.
Have
Thank
a good
you, my
day.
colleague.
Bye.
Bye-bye.